Co-editing the Handbook for Research on Teacher Education has been a significant part of our academic lives for these past 3 years. What we hoped to be able to accomplish with the handbook was really not to make a collection of articles by well-known scholars, although we certainly wanted the work of well-known researchers in the handbook, but we wanted really to compose a handbook that would allow us to take up some of the enduring puzzles, the research puzzles that keep us going, I guess, in teacher education. We aim to do this really by trying to play with an idea of bringing articles and research projects from around the world together in a way that looked at a scholarship of integration, but also what we ended up calling a scholarship of disruption, looking at what we know in areas, what we don't know in areas where perhaps we thought about research in ways that are a bit too narrowly conceived, and where we could open up new questions, revisit old questions, old issues in research and teacher education.
And as Jean already told, with integration, we want to have new areas in research of teacher education as teacher identity, teacher agency, moral perspectives on teaching, and so on, that were usually covered only with single topics in handbooks. Now we have widened up the perspective to have a whole wide treatment of these important topics and what they mean when we educate teachers.
We really wanted to have the international scope of researchers in the handbook. I think too often we've counted on quite a limited number of researchers, many from the US and Britain, and we really wanted to open up and include as many researchers as we could from around the world, not only because they come with different understandings, but the contextual information that they bring that allows us to understand how research in teacher education is taken up in different countries is very important. We know, of course, that we've only in some ways scratched the surface because first of all, it's an English-speaking handbook, so we went to the research and teacher education in English. But we also know that there are many countries, there are many things, as we write about in the handbook, that we know that we don't yet know about research and teacher education.
And one of the good moments when we were editing was one of the authors, Gavin Brown, and his topic on the article, what we really don't know about teacher education, what we nowadays don't know. It's such a huge area of knowledge that we're still uncovered. And I can say that it has been such a great learning experience for both of us.
Yes.
Doing this with all these great authors, reviewers, section editors. I've never learned so much in 3 years.
And I think what's been lovely, inspiring to me in many ways, is that really well-known researchers from around the world came together and authored chapters, co-authored chapters, wrote section introductions for us, and reviewed other people's chapters. And I think that we were hoping that in many ways the handbook itself is kind of an example of this opening kind of bringing together the dialogue that we hope between scholarships of integration and disruption.
The Handbook of Research on Teacher Education is a comprehensive overview of research on teacher education from pre-service through in-service teaching, and will provide both emerging and current scholars with a broad overview of the field as well as in-depth chapters on specific topics. What I like most about this new handbook is that it provides multiple perspectives on each topic and issue. So emerging scholars, our new doctoral students, will be able to look at these issues through different theoretical frameworks and understand that one topic can be explored with a variety of underlying assumptions. And for experienced scholars, I hope that this handbook will provide a way to appreciate these varying perspectives and create more dialogue and more opportunities for understanding that topics can be explored with different theoretical frameworks. The international perspectives are also very important in this handbook. We are a global research community, and I think it's important for our emerging students and scholars to understand how what they're reading and how their own research fits into a larger context of world research, and how people come at the studies that they do with and generating new knowledge from these global perspectives.
I think the most striking thing about the handbook is just the vast diversity of scholarship that's represented inside of its pages. There are multiple disciplines represented, and in each of the disciplines, almost equally striking is the quality of the scholarship that shows up and in its application to the question of teacher education research. And I think that represents a maturity in the field, a depth of scholarship that wasn't present 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And it's one of the reasons why the volume is so large, because there's such a diversity and there's so much to say about what's going on in the field. If I were to identify a single theme that emerged across the handbook, is a consistent interest in the ways in which state power and state bureaucracies desire to regulate teacher education in order to ensure a minimal level of quality, and how that sets in tension with teacher educators who are working closely with teachers and want to find ways to enable and enhance the ability of professionals to respond to the nuances of the context in which they're working, and to enact the possibilities that uniquely exist in those contexts. And that shows up in almost every nation state and across the disciplines, people looking at that sort of tension, the desire for sort of uniformity as a way to ensure accountability for a certain level of quality, and the desire to see certain kinds of unique context-based qualities be enhanced and not be erased by these sort of regulatory measures. And that's a dynamic that seems to be playing out across the globe, and that really bright and concerned and committed people are wrestling with everywhere.
From an international perspective, the handbook has a lot to offer. It shows the full spectrum of research conducted in the area at the moment. It reflects the past 10-15 years and also provides many directions towards the future. And it utilizes the multiple theoretical perspectives, shows the variety of methodological approaches utilized in the research on teacher education, in student teachers in different programs, and that's why it is especially useful for researchers, students, and teacher educators, and even the policymakers operating in the area of teacher education. And again, from the international perspective, it helps you to locate your own research within the broader scope of the research internationally. And this is especially useful when you're trying to think about your possible future directions in your research, try to think that what are the next steps to take when doing research further or developing the practices of teacher education. So there are many areas, for example, in my context, that are not yet emerging there, but I can learn from other researchers within the field that these might be the next directions or the steps that I as a researcher on teacher education and as a teacher educator should take into account. And this is what makes the handbook very unique, very unique scholarly piece within the area. And from the perspective of educational policymakers, it offers multiple perspectives to consider about the depth and importance of teacher education in the society, when taking the next steps, when educating our pupils and teachers further.